Hi, I'm Christina Gibson from Pepperdine University. Tracy and Sam, thank you so much for inviting me to share some views on this panel on responsible management. And I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there with you today in person due to a scheduling conflict. Now, Tracy asked me to share my views on two different questions. And so I'll do my best to do so. First of all, she asked me to share my perspective on responsible management. What is responsible management? Well, I thought I might pull apart those two terms and say, first of all, what does it mean to be responsible? Well, it means having accountability. It means having mutuality of action. It means inclusivity. It means sustainability, and it means ensuring human dignity. Then we might ask, what is management? Well, certainly there are for-profit managers, nonprofit managers, public managers. I would also say individual contributors can be managers because they're managing their own workload. Even supporters at home are managing the household. Even our children and young adults are managing our opportunities for the future. So essentially, we're all managers. So when you define responsible management like this, what might be the way forward? Well, I think it removes the us versus them. It establishes that everyone is a stakeholder and that there are shared interests inside and outside the organization. It also suggests that the greatest gains in terms of societal development will occur through relationships and through collaboration and through what I like to call co-development. So it might be useful to just stop and pause for a moment and think about corporate social responsibility, where we've been, what is the state of the art? Well, there was a very helpful review by Barnett looking at over 5,000 articles that tried to understand the relationship between CSR and outcomes. And they found most of these articles were examining the relationship between CSR and financial performance of the firm. In fact, only 3 articles evaluated and measured social impact. For example, the presence of volunteers in the classroom increased educational outcomes in schools. Not a single article measured long-term social impact of CSR. And this led Barnett to conclude that we really have not resolved that CSR initiatives can in fact contribute to societal development. So there's a particular type of corporate social responsibility that I've been interested in most recently, and that is corporate community investment, which is defined as voluntary contributions or actions by companies to help communities in their areas of operation address developmental priorities. And to be sure, companies invest billions in the communities in which they do business. The resources industry alone invests about $34 billion a year into community development. Esteves has conducted a series of case studies of some of the largest global resource companies, and she found that all of them fell short of community investment goals. It was often just an influx of funding or a one-shot arm's-length volunteer endeavor. There was no sharing of mutual interests or solutions or growth, and in fact, very little evidence of social impact, and in some communities, it resulted in community resentment. So yeah, there's a tension in the scholarly discourse. Management scholars intend that investing in communities is a means of doing good. Community development scholars suggest that this implementation of community investment could actually do harm. And critics question if it's even possible for companies to implement development in ways that have social impact and address broader goals such as poverty reduction or sustainability. So maybe we need to think about how we're defining community. Community can look like this, it can look like this, or like this, or like this. When we define community broadly as a sharing of an intrinsic connection, rituals and traditions, and a sense of obligation to each other, then the lines separating community inside and out begin to blur. And we can start to consider how can corporations and communities co-develop. So I'll stop there and turn to my second question that I was asked to answer. Tracy asked, how can companies and communities address grand challenges? And I would suggest that in order to address grand challenges, we do need a novel approach. I would refer to this as corporate community co-development. And this is near and dear to my heart. I've been researching this over the last 10 years, in fact. The research program was based on discussions with community activists as well as corporate leaders. And we built cross-sector partnerships among major companies, nonprofit, and communities. Now, these communities were at-risk communities with lots of problems: unemployment, poverty, substance abuse. They were located in Indigenous Australia, but they could have been located just about anywhere in the world. The communities determined their own needs and priorities, and the nonprofit matched volunteers and corporations with the communities. And the community volunteers spent significant time living and working in the communities and developing very deep relationships. The projects that these partnerships completed were amazing. Things like a small business development center. They improved a medical facility, implemented campaigns against smoking and alcoholism. One community built an aged care facility. Another built a youth hostel. And there were benefits both inside and outside the companies and the communities. Now, the research that I conducted was longitudinal and it was case-based. Each of the communities was considered a case. And I had the privilege and joy of working and living in the communities as well. We conducted open coding of a whole variety of different resources, everything from interviews to reflection journals to narratives and annual reports. And we arrived at a process model and identified some specific pathways through the model for co-development. So this is the model in total, and don't worry, I'm not going to go over the entire model. I just wanted to point out that there were inputs being provided, activities that then resulted in relational processes, which in turn resulted in psychological pathways, behavioral change, and longer-term social impact. So this was the focus of my recent paper in Academy of Management Journal. So here's just a sense of the three pathways, each of them relying on a different relational process. So the first relational process, mutual perspective taking; the second, reciprocal respect; and the third, communal advocacy. And let me give you a taste of each of these. So in terms of mutual perspective taking, being able to walk in another person's shoes. One of our Indigenous partners said, the most important thing that I've seen develop in terms of knowledge, being able to think outside the square, is the secondee, the volunteer, being able to put themselves in the place of an Aboriginal person and looking at the world from the point of view of an Aboriginal, but also the reverse. The second process, reciprocal respect. One of the corporate secondees mentioned that there are many positive, inspiring, committed people who are working extremely hard to bridge the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. They deserve respect, and this gives me hope for the future. And then finally, the third relational process was communal advocacy. This is when both the corporate volunteer advocated for the community, but the community also advocated for the presence of the company in the community. So one of our Indigenous partners said the mining company didn't understand a lot of Indigenous culture at first. They weren't there to be an Indigenous supporter. It wasn't really their core business, but it was a license to operate. So it really should be part of their business. I saw a better way forward. Rather than us taking a back seat, I thought we needed to sit at the same decision-making table. We had Indigenous representatives at the table. We needed to advocate for each other. And our program has had amazing educational impact. Long-term impact of these programs was also astonishing. We compared pre and post program, and we found that in the communities, there was greater labor force participation, increased educational attainment, improvements in general health, reductions in homicide, assaults, and robberies. And on the corporate side, we saw increased employee loyalty. We saw improvements in job performance, reports of improved engagement, and even reputational gains. One secondee put it like this: the secondment was very powerful. It was a this is it moment. It put me in the space of being able to contemplate where I was and, importantly, identify shortfalls. And the combination proved to be the most powerful personal development experience I've ever had in my life. There have been some lasting effects. The program continued to grow. It reached 2,500 corporate volunteers and 30 of the largest corporations in Australia across 115 different communities. The project was awarded the American Psychological Association Humanitarian Impact Award. And then more recently, I'm happy and proud to say that it also was awarded a Responsible Research Award by the Academy of Management Fellows. And it was recognized by the former Australian Prime Minister as a promising means to contribute to the capacity and capability of communities. My ongoing research suggests that this approach to corporate community co-development is generalizable to other settings and other challenges. And so I would just leave you with the thought that Through these relational and psychological pathways, the billions that are being invested in communities can go beyond just an influx of funding to have real social impact. And this is a form of corporate community co-development that can result in sustained return on investment for all involved. And again, so sorry that I couldn't be there with you today. I would love to hear from any of you if you have questions or want to have a discussion further about this approach to responsible management and achieving better good for society. Thank you so much.